Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. Happy Monday, November 6th. And we've got plenty to talk about in the world of the NBA. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me at Trevor_Lane over on X, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, welcome back. Should I say King Keith, who is ruling over ASU over the weekend at your salary cap. What was it? A salary cap bonanza, salary cap seminar? What was the what was the title?
It was technically a mock trade deadline.
Okay.
Was what it really was. So what Arizona State University, their law school, they actually have a sports business law component within their law school. They hosted their first ever mock trade deadline competition. So there was well over 100 students from I want to say it was like 40 or 45 different schools there, and there was a bunch of judges and people who do media stuff like myself and Eric Pincus. Jeff Siegel, who works for Clutch Sports, was there. Then a whole bunch of team personnel came in and met with the students and talked with the students, and then they did for 5 hours. They did a mock trade deadline where they each they had teams. They came mostly in teams, and they controlled each of the teams in the NBA. And they, for 5 hours, traded with each other, and then they had to come and make a presentation justifying all their moves and why they did what they did. And as the judges, we all graded them and rated them. Some cases very harshly on some of their moves, and some of them we were like, "That's actually really interesting." It was a lot of fun. I had a blast. It was great. It was funny on my flight out to Phoenix. I would by no means am I calling myself famous, but I was easily the third most famous person on my plane. 2 rows behind me was John Hollinger from The Athletic, and 2 rows in front of me, George Clinton from Parliament Funkadelic.
Yeah,
so
that's funny.
Crazy, right?
So that means though that plane goes down. At least you're going to be the third guy mentioned.
That's it, right? Yeah,
on the news articles, right?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like that was a blast, and
awesome.
you got to meet some really cool people. Now, I got to ask, was there like an ultimate winner of this mock trade deadline?
Yes. So we judged it, and there was a top 3. So they were judged on a number of different categories as far as their understanding of the salary cap, their understanding of teams, and the team that won was
if you
the
say
team,
Celtics, I'm going to say you're the biggest homer.
It was the team that won was the team that represented the Los Angeles Lakers.
Oh, well done, Keith. I'm so proud of you.
It was not, I did not just judge it myself. There were, about probably 15 total judges, if I had to guess, in that range. But they crushed it. The guys were from the Tulane Law School. Who teamed up, and they were all, when they entered the competition, if they entered as a team, in a team had to, I believe it had to be 3 or more students to be a team. They were then assigned randomly an NBA team. So it was cool. And there was a whole round where they were tested on their salary cap knowledge, that they were given resources to try to learn the salary cap in advance and the trade rules and all those things. So it was great. I will say, to their credit, nobody came up with any wildly illegal trades or anything like that.
That's good.
There was no.
That's surprising, actually.
Yeah, it was really cool. These gave me a lot of hope for the future. They were just extremely bright young men and women from all these different schools all over the country. It was really, really cool. Just a great event out there. So I'm looking forward to going back next year already. It's going to be a blast. So it was a lot of fun.
What did they do? The team that won, like, what were the moves that they made that were so set them apart, I guess?
Yeah, their big move was they kind of foreshadowing something I think a lot of people who play with the trade machine have foreshadowed. They targeted and went and got Kyrie Irving, which was kind of the way you would think, but they somehow in the discussions convinced Dallas to give them 2 pick swaps. And why they convinced them was as protection in case Kyrie pulls a Kyrie and
Yeah.
they needed something else. So that was the big one. But they
Wow.
also they used I believe it was the Rockets had made another trade and ended up even more crowded in the front court. They kind of snuck in at the end and they stole Tari Eason for Torian Prince
Wow.
and 2 second-round picks. So they also did something else. I can't remember what it was. It was a smaller move, but they made a series of trades. They kept kind of doing moves where it's like we'll send something out and then we'll bring something back. Like at one point, they got Seth Curry in the trade with Kyrie Irving. And just so everybody knows, again, mock trade deadline. They flipped Seth Curry to the Celtics for a future second with that. So there was all kinds of things like that. So it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
There were, I want to say in the 5 hours, I'm going to guess it was somewhere in the range of like 45 trades that the student run teams made. And there were some where it was a little like, I don't like agree with your reasoning on this. But
Uh-huh.
again, nothing was like, oh my gosh, like what were you doing
Right.
with this? And a couple had reads on teams and players. And the cool thing was they were able to get feedback from actual NBA executives that were there from front offices. I want to say it was probably about 8 to 10 teams were represented there. And they were actually able to give them feedback on, okay, like tell me your thing, because they gave the presentation to us. It was
Right.
an 8-minute presentation, but then there was a big reception after, and a lot of them came up and were like, hey, so what do you think about our trades? With that. So tons and tons. I am not going to shout out everybody individually. Tons of front office show listeners, which was really cool. To hear how many people spend a lot of their day watching us.
Mhm.
A lot of them were like, "Can you yell on Friday?" And I was like, "No, I can't yell in the middle of the event." But yeah,
They
that
were
was
asking
funny.
for the front
So,
office Friday
oh yeah,
yell?
and they wanted the front office Friday
That's
yell on
fantastic.
Friday, so that was fun. But yeah, it was really really cool. And then shout out, I can't, I actually now I don't think he gave me his name, but Jeff and I were walking over to the event on Friday morning for the first day, and we were walking over, and it was early. It was like 8:30 in the morning, and this guy comes running up and taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "Hey, front office show! I love the show. I listen every day." I instantly figured, oh, he must be going to the event. And I was like, you headed to the event? And he goes, no, what event? He's like, and I was like, oh, you're not here for the ASU thing? He's like, no, man, I'm headed to work. And then he goes, where's Trevor? I was like, Trevor's at home. we despite the fact we spend a lot of time together, it's pretty much all virtual.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
don't travel everywhere together. Las Vegas, the exception this past summer. But it was just very funny. So shout out to him too. Thanks for listening. But yeah, super cool. I met some people, I think I already said, at the Suns game that were listeners
Mhm.
to the show and everything. So just we're really great week out in Arizona.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, next year I'll come with you
There it
and
is.
we'll make a whole event out of it
Perfect.
in Arizona. It'd be fun.
Perfect.
All right, well, let's get into some NBA news here and talk about what's going on around the league. And I guess first, this is kind of NBA adjacent, I suppose. But Steve Kerr is going to be stepping down as the coach of Team USA now after the Olympics. So, of course, everybody is trying to say they're going to play in the Olympics. I believe it was Tyrese Halliburton, and somebody else just said it too.
Tyrese Halliburton said him and Anthony Edwards both
Both,
want to play.
right.
He kind of spoke on Edwards' behalf. This was like earlier last week, I believe it was.
So you've got all of these guys coming out of the woodwork saying we want to play. Your Kevin Durant, your LeBron, Anthony Davis, right? All these guys are saying we want to play. So Steve Kerr, he's going to go through this next cycle here, go coach at the Olympics, and then he'll cede control of Team USA after that, and we'll enter a new era. Be interesting to see what the list looks like for who the next coach is. We got a long way to go, obviously, to get there, and got to focus on the Olympics first. But Team USA is going to be looking for a new coach with it, after next summer.
Yeah, a lot of the social media buzz early is Eric Spoelstra is
That would
like
make
the
sense.
name people keep throwing out there. Yeah, it was assistant for Kerr. He's obviously one of the best coaches in the NBA, or arguably the best coach in the NBA. So it would not be a surprise. Also, maybe has a little experience dealing with a whole lot of egos on one team at a time, which is a big part of being the Team USA coach as well. So yeah, I think it's not unexpected that Steve Kerr was only going to do kind of the one cycle. And then he said, too, his experience when he was, because I think he did some stuff with Coach K and then he did it obviously with Pop, was that was when they were asking players to commit to the multiple year
Mm-hmm.
cycle. And he said, if we're not going to, continue with that, it makes sense to let new coaches get this opportunity. Also for Steve Kerr, this is he's consistently been a coach of a team that has made long runs in the playoffs. Now then you run that into the summer, so it just starts to be giving up an awful lot of time all at once. So I kind of get why he was probably saying, all right, I've done my time here, it's time to move on.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense that Steve Kerr would decide that he's going to move on from here, but hopefully, obviously, he can do it going out
Hmm.
with some Olympic gold around his
Yeah,
neck.
he better, because otherwise I'm going to be angry preemptively right
That's
now
right.
for next summer.
Yeah, you can't bring all the guys. You
Yeah.
can't have everybody saying I'm in and not come home with gold.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
I've said it before, I think on the show. Go over there and destroy everybody by 50. I have
Mhm.
no problem with that. Like
Absolutely.
that's what I want to see. I will be an ugly American when it comes to rooting on Team USA.
I think that's reasonable, Keith. I think that's reasonable. We've got uh JRE going to the Pels on a two-way deal. We were wondering where he would wind up. We
Mhm.
were wondering which team he would ultimately wind up with, but the Pelicans are going to pick him up on a two-way deal. A player who still has, I think, some value here, a guy who could bring you something out there on the wing, but the Pelicans are the team that ultimately are going to take a chance, and it makes sense given kind of the injuries that they've had on the wing.
Yeah, I think for Jeremiah Robinson Earl had such a good rookie season that was so promising. And then his second season was really just he got an injury. I think he had an ankle injury, if I remember that correctly, very early. And it just kind of wrecked his season last year. And then it just everything became a mess for him and he never really looked the same guy. So hopefully he can find that back. You're absolutely right. The Pelicans already dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. We're going to get into another major one for them in a
Mhm.
minute here, but yeah, this is seems like we need somebody with maybe a little more experience. And my guess is this probably came with some conversation around, hey, we have an open roster spot, but we're also over the luxury tax. They will make a deal, barring outside of them being like, yeah, we're title contenders. Outside of being in that position, they will make a deal to dodge the tax. It just doesn't make sense to pay the tax if you don't need to. They are, I believe, one of two or maybe the only franchise that's never paid the tax in their history. So would not be a surprise at all if they make a deal. And then it might be one of those where, all right, we've shed enough money. Now we can convert you to a standard contract that's prorated at the minimum and not dip back into the tax. I would not be surprised if there were some already pre-discussions had about that,
Yeah.
and that's why he was willing to sign on a two-way versus waiting a little while for something to open up for him somewhere else. So, good for him. Good for him to catch on there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you mentioned the other big injury, CJ McCollum dealing with a collapsed lung.
Second
Um,
time.
my goodness. I mean, that first of all, that sounds insanely painful, but this is something where we don't know how long. It's not, they don't know yet until they really get in there and figure
Yeah.
out exactly what's going on. We don't know how long CJ McCollum may be out. Hopefully this isn't a lengthy absence, but again, it's right now everything is up in the air. But obviously that's a pretty serious injury to a very key piece for the Pelicans here.
Yeah, big time. And I believe it was Jeff Stotts. I'm trying to find it. Yes. He said, related to this, I previously discussed pneumothorax injuries in the NBA in December 2021 when McCollum oddly suffered the same injury. He missed 18 games
Hmm.
when that happened. That was when he was still with the Trailblazers. If I remember correctly, he had that same thing, had a collapsed lung. So hopefully he seems to be in good spirits. I don't know if you saw one of those aggregation accounts put up a
Hmm.
picture of him and he's like, it kind of looks like he's almost doing like one of the like, love you guys, like chest pounds, but it's the picture of him and it looks like he's like holding his chest. I think just where they snagged the picture was
Yeah.
while he was in the middle of something. And CJ McCollum quote tweeted that with what a picture to use while sharing the news or whatever it was or like that. So hopefully, he's in good spirits and doing
Hopefully.
okay. with that. But yeah, scary for him that it's a second time with this.
Mhm.
Hopefully it's not a sign of a bigger problem or anything. But
Right.
he made it back to play and play really, really well after. So no reason to doubt. But my guess is probably we're probably in the range of at least a month's worth of missed games here for CJ McCollum. And that Pelicans team is they're dealing with it right now. They've
Yeah.
got Jose Alvarado hasn't played yet. Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy, those guys are all out. Brandon Ingram missed a game or two the other day. So it's like every year you look at it, it's like, man, I kind of like the talent there. And it just doesn't seem to ever fully come together. And that makes me wonder, at what point as a front office do you look at it and say, we got to do something just to get guys in here just to play. You don't make a trade just to make a trade, but we need some guys who we can feel confident aren't going to miss time,
Yeah.
and they'll be on the court. And that's tough because the talent mix looks really, really good, but it just doesn't matter if they're not out on the floor.
And we're going to take a peek at both conferences in just a few minutes here. We're going to look at the standings, and like we've been saying, it's super early, and there's
Mhm.
all kinds of mobility up and down in the standings and all of that. By no means is anything set in stone, but it's very far from it right now. Things are very fluid. But in the West, I believe the table is ultimately going to be set by injuries. That's what's going to determine who goes where this season, because I think there's a lot of parity in the Western Conference. And so you're going to have a few teams that emerge from the pack and just play at a higher level. You're going to have some teams who underperform. But when I look at the bulk of the West, I think injuries are going to go a long way to determine the ultimate slotting for the postseason. And so this is another tough blow for a Pelican side that's already dealing with, like you said, quite a few injuries right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll probably talk more about it when we get into
Yes.
the actual standings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Josh Primo gets a full NBA contract with the Clippers, so off of a two-way deal. Um, Clippers obviously sent out a lot of pieces in the James Harden trade, and so this gives them the room to bring up Josh Primo to a full contract. I don't know, like I'm not expecting him to get major minutes, but always good to have extra bodies there. And obviously, we know he's coming back from some stuff too.
Yeah, it was noted in report from Shams Charania that he's been in therapy and he's working through his issues that cost him his job with the Spurs there, which including him reportedly multiple times exposing himself to female members of the Spurs staff in San Antonio, and that was one of those ones when he immediately got waived. We're like, oh. Something bad
Mhm.
happened here because this just doesn't go down like this. But we hope he gets himself right and can get his career back on track. He was a guy with a lot of potential there. So part of the deal for the Clippers was they were down to 13 players. You can only be at 13 players for up to 2 weeks at a time. 13
Mhm.
players on standard contracts. I should be sure about that.
Right.
So that's something that they've got to get through. And you had 2 weeks to add a player. You only have 28 total days that you can be under the roster maximum. So they're kind of going through that. So yeah, they're there now, and they should be back up to speed here now with this, and then they'll probably sit on that open roster spot until we get into buyout season. And then
Yep.
Xavier Moon is going to replace Primo on a two-way. He's a guy who's kind of bounced on and off the Clippers roster for the last couple of years. Good player. He is a uh, like extremely confident shooter scorer type who is just very small. He's only like barely over 6 feet, so he's
Mhm.
very much trapped in a point guard's body, but a big time scorer at the G League level. And he's one of those guys. He's like I always say they're like 4A players in baseball. They're
Right.
too good for the minors, but not quite good enough to crack it in the NBA. But on a two-way, you should be okay.
All right, then I guess really the big story: James Harden will be making his debut tonight for the
Yeah,
Clippers. They're on the road. Keith, off the top of my head, I think they're in New York, right? They're
New
playing the
York.
Knicks.
Yep, playing the
Yeah,
Knicks
so
tonight.
so there's that. James Harden making his debut, and we'll see what that looks like. Really curious to see how they spread the ball around. Who's got initiator responsibilities? Is the ball in James Harden's hand a lot? Is it Russ? Is it Kawhi? Is it Paul George? What exactly does that look like? And they're going to have some time to try to figure that out. But from the get go, what are their initial thoughts in terms of role, in terms of who's got the ball at any given moment?
Yeah.
That's going to be something to keep an eye on with this Clippers team. And then um, What about defense? What does that look like? Can you put all four of those guys on the floor and have a competent defense that can do something to slow down the next, or will they have all four on the floor at the same time? Do you just start all four guys? I don't know. That'll be interesting too.
Yeah, it sounds like Ty Lue said at some point over the last few days he is going to start Harden with Westbrook as kind of the backcourt, and then they kind of go from there. I think the thing is, a lot of people instantly went to, why is he not starting? Why is he not starting Terrence Mann? And this is a bad idea, and all those
Mhm.
kind of things. Well, Terrence Mann is hurt, so
Yep,
Terrence Mann
right.
is not going to be available just yet. So they're in a spot where, yeah, it makes sense that they're going to be with Harden starting. Defensively, I think you're going to see a lot of switching, and Harden has been at his best in recent years defending bigger players because
Yeah.
he is pretty strong and he can hold his position, and then his lack of foot speed and lack of effort, if we'll call it that, out on the perimeter isn't quite as exposed. So I think you'll see him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like checking Julius Randle quite a bit
Mhm.
in the course of this game, because that's something he's actually done fairly well over the years. So I'm very interested to watch how all of this come together. And as much as who starts, who closes games for these guys, like you said,
Yeah.
who's on the floor at the end, that's going to be a big question too. So but some of that's not going to be known until Terrence Mann is back and fully in swing.
All right, let's finish up today by taking a peek at the current standings. Let's look at the way things sit right now, starting with the Eastern Conference. Keith, we know that a lot of what we're going to be looking at is the noise of a small sample size,
Mm-hmm.
but nonetheless, you got to be feeling pretty good. Your Celtics 5-0 and a plus 18.4 point differential. That's absurd. 18.4. Again, they will not finish the season
Yeah.
quite that high. That would be insane,
Yeah.
but Celtics looking really good. Home, road, doesn't matter. They're just winning.
Yeah, if they do that, I will come on the show and like dye my hair green and I don't know, green body paint all over and in a Speedo or whatever else people want to see or not see.
Whoa.
I'll go absolutely bonkers. That's how confident I am.
It's,
They will not finish with an 18.4 scoring differential.
we went from
Uh,
a PG to a PG-13
yeah,
rating
there it
real
is.
fast there, Keith.
Yeah, we did. Um, it's but it's yeah, I mean they're off to a great start. There's the thing that's most encouraging to me is this team last season had a habit of playing down to opponents that they should beat.
Mhm.
And they played the Indiana Pacers last week in a game where Tyrese Halliburton sat out because he had picked up an injury the game before, and they destroyed him. They beat him by 51 points or something like
Oof.
that. They also played a Nets team that played them kind of tough. They played the Wizards, who aren't very good, and they destroyed the Wizards too. So those are the encouraging signs with the Celtics is they're not playing down. They will. They're going to lose a game. That's a bad loss at some point. Everybody has a handful of those. There's the old saying is in the NBA. There's like 5 to 8 games where nothing goes right no matter
Yeah.
what you do. There's 5 to 8 games where nothing goes wrong, and then it's where your season is made is everything in the middle. It's what
Yep.
you do on the games in the middle. So yeah, but obviously I'm very excited that they're 5-0 and look so good with that. The other teams I think have been fun out of the gate. Orlando,
Yeah.
4-2.
4-2. Yep.
I promise I'm not doing this because I know they beat the Lakers the other day. Anthony Black's defense in
It
that
was
game. I mean, he had
fantastic.
D'Angelo Russell in jail, and that was really exciting for Magic fans. He, he's just going to have to make enough shots to really become what you want him to be. But his defensive ability, his playmaking, especially at his size, is super exciting there. And that was shorthanded win for the Magic, and that's big when they can get wins over good teams when they're down players like that. That's a huge thing for them.
Yeah, and it's worth noting it was an extremely shorthanded Lakers team as well.
Yeah.
They had 8 players for that game, but that said, the Magic came out there, and again, I cover this a bunch for Lakers Nation, but the Magic came out there and just outcompeted the Lakers. The
Yeah.
Lakers looked like they didn't want to be on the floor, and the Magic just went out there and just beat them to everything, every loose ball, every off. They had 19 offensive rebounds in the game. It was impressive seeing the Magic go out there and just outwork an opponent, particularly when,
Mhm.
like you said, the Magic had every excuse to say, "Hey, we're down players too.
Yeah.
We can." maybe we're not going to go out here and really take it to you, but they showed up full of energy and ready to go, and they were excellent.
I thought too, just with that one game too, I watched it on the plane,
Yeah,
and I hadn't gotten deep into the box score. I knew Orlando had won, but I hadn't really gotten into the box score. Then when I sat down and looked at it later when I was home yesterday, one of the weirdest impact versus stats games I've ever seen from Anthony Davis. Because his
yeah,
stat line, if you don't look at the plus minus, looks amazing.
yeah,
Looked like he played great. But if you actually watch the game, it was like he wasn't good. Like I know he had like 7 blocks, but
yeah.
there were times when it was just guys were blowing by him like he was, a traffic cone. And it was just a very weird game with that, where it's like stat line, and I think I tweeted something like stat line doesn't always equal impact. And that was it. But yeah, it was, anytime the Magic are beating a team that's one of the better teams in the league, it's a good win. And if they do it, under, fairly even circumstances with
Hmm.
players out on both sides, so much the better for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other surprises in the Eastern Conference? Something that jumps out to me. I mean, the Knicks sitting at 2-4 right now, the Heat sitting at 2-4 currently. Again, we're deep into small sample
Yeah.
size territory here,
Yeah.
right? We're
Good
6
week.
games.
And
So
they're above 500. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But those teams sitting below right now is maybe a little bit of a surprise. The Sixers, without James Harden, sitting at
Hmm.
4-1 and having a point differential of plus 12.2. Tyrese Maxey, oh my goodness, he's
Oh, yeah.
been unleashed. Like he is, I would have to say, the heavy front runner at this point. For again, long way to go, but for most improved, he's been absolutely fantastic. So the Sixers sitting at 4-1 right now have been really impressive as well. Anything else that really jumps out at you from the East before we move on to the West?
Yeah. I'm with you on all of those. I think, this is the Bucks
Mm,
when they've lost have
uh,
looked really bad.
their
You know,
defense, their
yeah,
defense,
that's
yikes.
yeah, they've got a lot of things to iron out there, and I'm not so sure I agree with bringing Brooke Lopez up to the level of the ball as often as they are. I don't think
Yeah.
that's a thing that is going to work, and I don't think you're making the best use of his skills there. So, but that's part of the new coach wants to implement his style, and Adrian Griffin, and then there's going to be some of all right, I got to go with some of what we know works here, but yeah, but they'll be fine.
Mhm.
They'll figure it all out, but when they have lost, they just haven't looked very, very good. And then, Washington 1-4. I think that's to be expected.
Yes.
Hornets have been a little more competitive than I thought too
Sure.
so far.
2-4,
Yeah, they're
but
2-4,
the
but they've played mostly close games.
all right, let's take a look at the Western Conference. Finally, no winless teams in the NBA.
Yeah,
The Memphis Grizzlies picked up a win against the Blazers last night after they played 2 games in a row against the Blazers, lost the first one. They are now 1-6. Looking at the West, it's kind of what we thought, with the exception of right. I mean, just all these teams that are
yeah,
all kind of right around each other in terms of standings, with the exception maybe of Phoenix, and they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. Bradley Beal yet to play for the Suns.
yeah.
Devin Booker's been in and out with injuries, but the Suns sitting at 3-4, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but once again, some major injuries there. And then the Kings sitting at 2-3. This was a very clear playoff team in the West last season, so maybe a little surprising that the Kings are sitting down there at just 2-3 right now.
Yeah, and I think you get the Kings out of that range, right? Maybe the Spurs dropped, I think, down in there eventually. We'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
if Wembanyama is everything he's been so far, then the Spurs are probably going to be pretty good. Dallas 5-1 start. That's really encouraging for them,
Mm-hmm.
considering they were not a very good team for a long chunk of last year. And I realized they punted at the
Yeah.
end of the season, but they went through some stuff at the end of last year with that. Memphis, good that they get the win. I was asked, I know you've talked with the guys in Memphis too,
Yeah.
quite often. I do a weekly radio spot in Memphis, and one of the things they said is, all right, we're at the time they were 0-5, and they said, what should be the goal now when John Morant gets back after the 25 game suspension? And I said, really, ideally, you want to be like 10-15, like go 10-10 the rest of the way, and
Yeah.
you're probably okay because that puts you in range of being able to push through and get after it. I said, but yeah, you start falling, if by the time you get back, you're like 8-17 or something like that. I know it's only a 2-game difference, but that's tough. I mean, that's going to be hard. You're fighting to get into the play-in, and I'm not picking on the Lakers, but you know what that does. That means
Yep.
you have to go hard the whole stretch run, and that just takes a lot out of a team. It's you're kind of almost capping what your upside is on the season with that. But yeah, it's still early, like we said, but we just wanted to pop around a little bit and
Mhm.
talk about some teams and that stuff. And we'll try to do this probably every couple weeks. We'll
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking where most teams are at either 5 or 6 games played. I
Yep.
figure we check it again at 10 games. 10 games is usually
Yep.
a marker
Yeah.
where I check in on team. Then
Yep.
here's where we're at and everything. So again, before anybody overreacts to any of the standings for anybody
Yeah.
really, 6 games. Think of it's an 82 game season, right? There's nothing. Sometimes, Keith, I noticed this just in terms of, and this can be true of media too, but especially of fans. It's the narratives that get set early in the season, they linger past sometimes the point where
Hmm.
they're actually true.
Yeah.
And so we just got to be careful with that. When we look at, oh, this team's playing well right now, this team's playing poorly, there's still so much time for all this stuff to change. So just keep that in mind. Like what we're seeing right now doesn't mean this is what it's going to be for the entirety of the season. We got a
Yeah.
long way to go. And that's why we're gonna check in every once in a while and just kind of update on where everybody's at, what's been going on, because I think it's important that we understand the journey itself and the changes that can take place during that journey, and not just this is what a team is, period, from now until the end of time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing with players too, right? Especially
Uh-huh.
players in new spots or rookies. Like nobody know we don't know anything yet, right? There's a long time before we're gonna know a lot of stuff. And that's why even with guys who are new into the league, most teams it's like you don't know until you're going into year 4. You've got to get 3 good years under your belt before you really know, what these guys are going to be. And that's good and bad. Some guys look great out of the gate. Some guys look really bad. Like this time a year ago, and then to your point, carried a lot longer than it should have. People were saying Keegan Murray is terrible and wasn't going to be
Right.
good. And that carried long after Keegan Murray was actually playing pretty well for the Kings. I just think people gave up, right? And they stopped looking, you stopped checking in. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, this dude's playing and playing well in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he played well for the last like 40 games of the season. You just stop paying attention. But yeah, we'll try to do these check-ins every so often and get to it especially on the days where there's not 9 million things going on, other stuff to talk about. But
Exactly. Well, and usually there is, because it's the
yeah,
NBA, and we certainly love it.
they, they don't leave us
Right.
short on content.
That is true. That is true. Last thing on this, just the longest winning streak right now, it is of course your Celtics, because they haven't lost. So
Sure.
they are 5-0, and I'm looking the longest losing streak. It is the Detroit Pistons, who have lost their last 4 currently. We'll check in on that
Yeah.
again. Um, we'll hit the 10-ish game mark or so, and we'll see what the streaks are looking like at that point.
And I'll add one other thing too.
Huh?
It's a weird week in the NBA this week. There's 12 games today. Also odd, the latest game tips at 9 o'clock Eastern. So I'm not
Hmm.
complaining because that means can get to bed at a reasonable hour. But a busy night tonight. No games tomorrow on Tuesday. It's election day, so the NBA takes that day off now. That was one of the initiatives that kind of came out of the pandemic and
Mhm.
the bubble season and all that. Then a 14 game slate on Wednesday, so everybody in action except for 2 teams, and then only 2 games on Thursday, one of which is Magic and Hawks in the Mexico City game. That is the late games, and then we go back to 9 games on Friday, and that is in season tournament night number 2. So I'm really excited. I did not get to watch the full of the in season tournament on the first night because I was at the event that I was at this past week. So I'm really
Mhm.
excited to sit down and have my eyes and retinas burned by these courts and everything else.
Okay, so I got to admit, I went on a little mini rant over on Lakers Nation about that. Without hearing my opinion, what was your opinion? You mentioned your retinas being burned. What was your opinion of the
Some
floors
of them
actually
were way
seeing them
too
in action?
much, way too
Yes.
much. The Bulls
Yes.
court.
Okay. 100%.
My issue, and I saw this on social media, was the number of people who are like, "Hey, I'm colorblind," or "I'm, this color, like
Oh,
I'm red
I hadn't
colorblind."
thought of that.
And a lot of people are like, "I can't, like, I couldn't watch the game. I had to shut it off because I could not follow what was going on." Did you see the Grant Williams Mavericks thing?
No, I didn't.
So in the I think it was Dallas, Denver. Don't quote me on that, but I know it was the in-season tournament game.
Uh-huh.
He was warming up and he was leaving every shot short. And he's like, something's wrong. Like this was in shoot around, I believe. And he's like, something's wrong. He's like, when I miss long. And I can say, as somebody watched the first 4 years of his career, that tends to be true. And he said, I'm leaving every shot short. And he was insistent that they measure it. The 3-point line was a foot off. So they had to like scrape it and repaint it, and you could see it on the close-ups on the court that
Oh my gosh.
the 3-point line was off. So yeah, so just weird stuff like that. I know I think it was the Pacers court. There was a spot that the players were saying was slippery. It was slick with that. So yeah, I get it. I get why they did it. I think you could have done just the kind of the runway part of
That's
it.
exactly what I said.
But the rest is it was
God.
too much. But we'll see.
we are so of one mind on something, because that was exactly what I said. Was you could have just done the stripe down the middle, and everybody still flipping channels would have went, whoa, wait, what? Something big is happening. What is going on? Why does the court look different? Because that's really what the NBA wants. They want you to stop and go, oh, what's different?
It's
what's
the tournament night, and then yeah.
But my brief, and I ranted about it over on Lakers Nation. My brief take is, I thought that I think that the NBA has some of the best athletes in the world. They're playing basketball at the highest level, and you don't want to do anything to distract or take away from that. And that's exactly what they did. They took the focus away from the players on the floor.
That said, I'm not going to lose my mind. It's only 4 nights of the not 4 nights, but 4 games worth of this. Each team's only going to use these twice, maybe a third time, if they make it into the quarterfinal knockout round. So I don't, as long as nobody gets hurt, and that and as long as the games are being played under the right dimensions, then I'm okay with it. But yeah, it's funny. But that's why that guy in Arizona, I guess, thought you were just there with me somewhere, and you were just lagging behind, because apparently we should just at least we have an afterlife plan. When our families get tired of us, we'll get a place together and hang out, and
there it is. And we'll just talk basketball all day.
Yep. We'll grow old together in our rocking chairs, complaining about the color of basketball courts,
complaining about basketball courts, and anything else that we can.
Yeah, whippersnappers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. All right. Well, let's wrap things up there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again. Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office Show over on YouTube, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.